Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Touhou Luna Nights. Time to talk to our boss.
You're here early, Sakuya.
Mistress, if you're going to bother me, at least do it when I have free time.
Does a maid ever have free time?
That's why I want you to send me back. I haven't even finished cleaning the mansion, doing laundry, or shopping today.
I can't let you go that easily. I challenge you, Sakuya. I'll drench you in your own blood.
So, the boss of the clock tower is series mainstay Remilia Scarlet. So Remilia does have more projectiles than Patchouli, but Patchouli is still such a wake-up call that I do consider her the harder boss. With that said, Remilia is still a pretty tough customer. This attack here in specific is one that took me a while to figure out on my first playthrough. The pink projectiles just fall straight down and get stopped by time normally. However, the yellow ones actively do have the yellow aura, so they do reverse. Once you figure that out, it's pretty easy to get around that one. A lot of her other attacks are pretty standard projectiles, like these ones that curve in and out, then go the inverse with it. There's the ones that just rain directly at you. Probably her worst attack for me to dodge outright is when she actively transforms into a lot of bats. You need to mash to take them out so she can eventually respawn, but the issue I have with it is just for some reason I find it very hard to track where they are relative to my position, or at times even notice that she did that attack at all if I'm looking somewhere else on the screen, because they are very small sprites. The big thing to keep in mind with this fight is that since she fires so many projectiles out, restoring your MP and HP here is actually very easy to do if you either use the time stop or time slow with very effective timing. Due to her altitude on the screen being relatively consistent as well, this is also another really good fight for the chainsaw, which admittedly is most boss fights. Which I think, technically speaking, the best way to use the chainsaw is to actively freeze time and then, like, throw 2 or 3 out and then unfreeze time and throw another 2 there if your MP can manage that. I know that's how speedruns tend to beat the final boss, is just carefully timing speedrun placements so that you can maximize as much damage as you can. With that said, if there's one thing I will give Remilia, I think she has easily the hardest pinch move to figure out how to dodge, and even if you know how to dodge it, doing so is still probably the most stressful out of any of that attack type in the game.
That was fun. But this is where the real fun begins.
So her pinch move is to move to either the center of the arena or either extreme third of the arena, and spawn in these pink orbs, which then become fire lasers that track left to right. Timing this is actively the hard thing to do because you need to double jump and then hover on either extreme side of it to actively dodge the furthest left or right laser. If you're somewhere in the middle there, you're getting hit, and those projectiles hit real hard. What's also pretty rough is there's actively 2 variants of that attack, and the variant she uses towards the end of her health bar is easily the scarier one, although it's ultimately the easier one to dodge. Now, something that is technically present when you're playing the game earlier on, but Remilia is where you really start to notice it, is that the bosses in this game do actively get a lot of health as you go on, but you can melt it down pretty quickly with the tools you get. But when you're playing a boss fight, time kind of dilates around you as you're trying to process dodging all these projectiles. So even if the fight is only maybe like 3 to 5 minutes long, it feels like you're in there for like 10 to 15 minutes in some cases. God, dodging that attack is tight sometimes.
You're pretty good. I might just win in this world. I'm so proud of you, Sakuya. But there's no way I'll lose.
Time for the scarier version of her pinch attack. She's going to place them in a line, and they're just going to explode in the line. This looks scary, but if you just get between 2 of them and slowly follow the gap, left or right, depending on the direction they're going in, it's very easy to dodge. It just looks overwhelming and impossible to get around. On my first playthrough, I died to that attack a lot, which is really painful given how close you are to winning by the time she uses it. I think what it really came down to is it took me a while to realize that there isn't like a splash damage effect directly at the foot of it. It's completely safe between the lines.
What? I can't believe it! Ah, well. I really wanted to show off and beat you at the very last second.
Well, either way, I had a great time. Thank you for inviting me to this playground, mistress.
Sakuya, how are you able to use your sealed time powers? Did Patchouli do something?
Oh. It's because of this device I got from the Kappa Nitori. You created her to help me out, right?
Don't be absurd. I only made the character that saves data.
So if that Nitori was the real deal.
I'm sure Panche must have summoned her without telling me. Unbelievable. I'll have a word with her later.
Well then, let's head back, mistress. I still have work to do.
Oh well, I guess you're right. Though it is a shame. When I snap my fingers, everything will return to how it was. Put on the tea when we get back.
Yes, mistress. Huh? Is something wrong?
That's strange. We should have returned to the real Scarlet Devil Mansion, but...
So we can't get back?
This feeling... Could someone have disturbed this space? But who? Don't you get it?
Who's there?
I took control of this world while you were busy playing. Now no one can leave unless I let them.
The nerve. You dare take control of my world?
My world, you say? This world is only possible because of my power.
Show yourself, whoever you are. I'll give you a proper slap.
If you want to play with me, come to the throne room. Defeat me, and I'll give this world back. See ya.
Mistress, where is this throne room?
It's on the top floor of this castle.
Sakuya, can you go on ahead? I believe there's some other area that I should check out first. Leave it to me. I'll deal with the perpetrator immediately.
Please do.
I can't believe the mistress's own world has been taken over. Who would do such a thing? And what should I do from now on? For the time being, I guess I should head towards the throne room. As much as it feels like Remilia's moveset can be a final boss, we are not done yet. We still have at least another stage to go, and even then, a little more beyond that. Which actively you can kind of figure out pretty quickly if you just look at the map screen, because they tell you on that screen how much of the map you've explored. When you reach Remilia, you're at most at like 50 to 60% depending on what rooms you've found up to then. So, oops. Hello again, Nitori.
Hey, I was looking for you, human.
Do you need something?
I have another present for you. Look, it's a shop ticket.
Another one? You really want me to do a lot of shopping, huh?
Shopping? Well, yes, there's that, but my main purpose is collecting gems.
Yes, your beloved gems. Well, I'll gladly take the ticket off your hands.
You're close to the end, but you should take the time to sell gems and get your equipment ready.
Yeah, I'll think about it. I mean, I'll take it, but I'm still not going to use it. I got other stuff to do. So this specific stage has a lot going on between the electric orbs that just pulsate electricity between them and all that, as well as several long paths that you need to go on to either get upgrades or even keys. But after I go out of my way admittedly to kill these dragons as well as the little cherub on a minigun, I'm gonna go out of my way to take this lower path here first, as it has some interesting things for us to grab. On top of the fact I really want some extra experience because, frankly, the final bosses I really do want to have a couple of extra levels for. Over here is not only where the first save point for this specific level is, but if you take a look at the map by pausing the game, you'll realize you're getting pretty close to a pretty familiar location. We're only, I think, maybe 2 or 3 rows above where the Marissa boss fight was, and we're slowly approaching it. This pathway ends up leading to the door I mentioned earlier in the LP that was back in level 2, but we didn't have the key for. And while we still don't technically have the key for it yet, we're coming up on it. There it is. This allows us to go straight from level 2 into level 5, which is the fastest way to get back and forth between early and late game. Due to this, and us having most of the major movement utility at this point in the game, this is where I'm going to go out of the way to do a lot of speed up to go across the game's map and get the remaining items we still haven't gotten from earlier stages. The screw knife was the last thing I was really waiting for in that regard. Worth noting though, the blue door we just went through is actively the one that speedrunners use to skip from before the Marissa fight all the way till after the Remilia fight and then just blitz through stage 5 to get to the endgame real fast. Specifically, they use the cannonball firing enemy over there to fire their cannonball and have it hit the wall and then push them through the floor in a way where they can double jump back up through to stage 5. It's kind of funny. First item I want to grab is the time up here in stage 2. Just got to get back here to the central room and then use the grip knife to get up there. Next up after that, I want to go all the way back towards where we got the double jump here in Stage 2. As in order to get all the items in that direction, you need both the grip knife and the screw knife from Stage 4. The warp point is placed in this general vicinity, which is nice for this in specific. Like I brought up earlier in the LP, I'm partially convinced they placed the warp points where they did more to be convenient for going back for specific items rather than a specified location central to the area itself. I still think the game needed 1 or 2 more warp points per stage just to make going back to any portion of them a little more convenient, but as small scale as this game is, that also would have felt really weird at the same time. There is such a thing as being too generous, it is worth noting. Over here is both the HP up and MP up for this stage. This is one of the biggest reasons why I actively went out of my way to get the screw knife before going after item completion, as trekking back to this area once just to get the HP up and then coming back later on would have just been really clunky feeling. So I came here to Stage 2 first for completion because Stage 5 directly leads to it. But my next goal is actually to head over to Stage 3 via the warp point specifically, because this is one of the few cases where the warp point is actually correctly placed for what I need to go grab. Specifically, the blue key also allows us to open up a door we saw back in Stage 3. And this is the first of a set of collectibles that seems weird at first, until you remember the whole deal about gemstones giving you bonus points to your stats the more of them you have. These are gem caches. There's one of those for effectively every single one of the 5 or 6 types of gemstones in the game, but they're very backloaded with how you can get them. This is the earliest you can get one by most considerations, barring, I think, clipping into certain floors. Also, we need to go back into this room where we actively, I think, ended off Part 2, because we also needed the screw knife in here to get the knife up for this stage in specific. So by and large, on the recording aspect of this game, every single stage took between 20 and 30 minutes, and that was its own recording session that I would then edit down and together from there. The recording session I did this collection, which I think was the same as all of Stage 4 or 5, was far and away the longest, and I think it did technically double it, but that's because I also took a few more moments to pause and take a look to see if I was going the right direction, make sure I remembered where I was going and all that. It does take a while relative to this game's scale, but worth noting, I have played Metroidvanias where you need to go more out of the way that take longer. Hell, that's technically, in my memory at least, Metroid Prime 2. When I've replayed that game relatively recently, I was a little bit wrong about that, if only because I was better about reading the level design and where to go and all that time around, but the Prime games in specific are actually a very good example of having to go very far out of your way to reach the end game or even get a completion because of the Chozo relics, the Sky Temple keys, and all that. I'll get to Prime 2 and 3 eventually. I'm still waiting to see if they're going to even remotely do a Metroid Prime 2 remastered and a port of 3's Wii version to the Switch, because, frankly, it's weird they still have it at this point. With that gem cluster out of the way, though, the next power-up I'm going for is actually right nearby, just near where we first got our first key here in Stage 1. But I am actively grinding a bit of gemstones right there just for the sake of why not, just to showcase that's a good place for it. This is actively an item I could have gotten as soon as I first got the double jump, so one of the first items I could have backtracked to get. But more so than any of the other ones, I really recommend waiting to get this one because they'll actively throw the Frankenstein's creatures at you this early. And unless you do some time stop shenanigans or time slow to get around them, they're actively very dangerous to encounter at that point in the game because with the levels you'll be at in level 2, they'll be enough to more than likely two-shot you. So, be careful. And right there is actively another warp gate, the white shrine gate in specific. That does nothing for now. In fact, when the game first launched, it didn't do anything at all, if the room itself was even there, to be honest. What I mean about that, though, I'll elucidate more on later on in the LP. Just know that this game did get some notable updates not long after launch that were planned from launch. They just either didn't have them ready in time or things like that. And here I am doing a little bit of level grinding just because the Frankensteins give some good experience just to get myself up to level 16. I'm actively forgetting if I've mentioned this or not yet, but worth noting, you can actively tell how close you are to a level based on how much of the number is glowing green. Because the 16 is about a quarter of the way full to a third of the way full. I'm about a quarter or a third of the way to the next level. And also worth noting, the way this game does experience always throws me off when I first come back to it. In specific, when you look at your experience, you're looking at your total cumulative experience across the entire game, like in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, admittedly. However, instead of telling you how many experience points you need to reach the next level, they show you the cumulative total you need to reach. And for some reason in my head, that just never reads right the first several hours I play this. With that said, now we're accessing Stage 5 proper, and yeah, this is far and away the largest and most dangerous stage in the game. If only because a lot of the hazards also do a lot of damage, but not for nothing, so do the enemies. These specific enemies here that are on miniguns rather than cannons especially can just really drain your health quickly with how much damage they do. Which, as I believe I've already mentioned, is a bit of a theme in the game to begin with, let alone the Kumajo Remilia games. But also, just given the whole setup of the original main series, is sort of them trying to be in line with the difficulty curve present there. But in this game specifically, it really feels like they want you to actively spend gems over at Nitori to buy experience points and get more levels that way, which if that's the case, it's a way around it, but because of how I want to do things, I'm not doing that much, so I don't really have the option. And because of that, if you're just trying to not buy too much stuff, the game can definitely feel like it's trying to force you against a wall and just punch you repeatedly sometimes. And I won't lie, especially on a first playthrough, it can cause the game to feel a little off-putting and potentially overwhelming depending on how you like to play Metroidvanias. The only other games I can think of that had a kind of similar feeling damage curve in this genre were Metroid Fusion, specifically during the first third of that game. The entirety of Samus Returns in my memory, I haven't played that game in a while, and I guess technically Metroid Dread, but Dread at least tried to sort of reclassify its mechanics in such a way where it feels like it was meant to be more of an action game at the same time, so the damage felt a little more sensical in that case. But that said, being in the final main stage here, we are going to get quite a few new enemies. We've already seen these little fire-breathing gargoyles before in the previous stage. They hurt a lot, so watch out for them, but they also have a lot of health. But you really want to watch out for the flying gargoyles that can point their swords and fire projectiles out of them, because A, the projectiles come out pretty quickly, but again, they have a lot of health. Now, despite this being effectively the final stage, we are still going to have to do the structure we've seen in the prior stages where we need to branch off to a certain direction to get an item to progress on in the main direction. However, it's not a movement utility upgrade this time around or a new attack, it's just gonna be another key. With that said, the crawl for that key, I'd say, is arguably just the hardest part of the game, period, in terms of the pure platforming. There are sections to follow that do more damage or are potentially overall harder, but it's how the trip feels in general that just makes it feel like it is overall the hardest part of the game. I distinctly remember dying there several times on my first playthrough, and trying to do this playthrough deathless in terms of how the save file was treated definitely made it a little bit of an anxiety moment. Yeah, worth noting, by the way, in case for some reason someone's watching this that's trying to do achievement hunting for the game. I am doing the achievement where you play through the game without dying, but it's one of those achievements that you can kind of game, at least on the PC release, because you can just go into the literal game files, copy your save file physically to some other part of your hard drive, and if you die, go into the save files, delete the one that's there, and paste the one that you already copied back in, and you'll be back at that save point you saved at, and the death won't count. I want to see you might be able to try and do like an Alt F4 mid-death animation, and that might count, but I didn't test things to that level. If only because of my years of getting achievements and trophy hunting and all that, I've seen things go horribly wrong due to me misinterpreting the smallest of things. In a way, though, the way I'm doing that actively does kind of remind me of when I was going for the platinum in the main campaign for Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope, because I had to just either quit out to the game's main menu or at times over to the PS menu, I believe, to avoid a death being counted on the New Game Plus All Checkpoints Destroyed Deathless run, which was a horrible mistake, or to reload my save file that I had a copy of already when I was going for the Beat the Game in Under 90 Minutes trophy. I still go back and forth between which of those two playthroughs was more annoying for me to do. I think the New Game Plus Deathless All Checkpoints Destroyed thing was technically physically harder, if only because a mistake cost me so much more. But also, not for nothing, the Under 90 Minutes thing is pretty tight if you're not a practiced speedrunner. Because some of those stages are upwards of 8, 9 minutes long, depending on how things go, so you don't have a lot of extra time depending on how you play through the stages. Let alone a potential lack of power-ups in some cases as well. With that said, welcome to the section that I would consider the hardest part of the game. This room in specific, as well as the next one, there's a bunch of high-damage electric orbs and their beams and all that that are just very good at eating through your health unless you do a lot of experience grinding. With that said, if you're willing to take a hit after using the save point nearby we used a moment ago, you can skip a good half of this first room by just taking a hit through the first set of electric orbs. Which I would recommend doing, especially if you're like level 15, 16, 14 and below. It could be a little bit scary, but it's doable. And like I already said, our reward here is the purple key. This is actively the only key you find this early into a stage, and that isn't needed to directly access another stage, by most definitions at least. But that's also because there's technically not a stage after this. Technically there is, but that's a whole different deal that I'll talk about when I get there. I'm actually speeding my way back through this room just for the sake of the time more than anything, because this room sucks to go through one way. Going back the other direction just kind of feels bad as well. But I do only go until we get back to this save room, because it's time for us to head the opposite direction from where we got the key to actively find the door that the key goes into. This room does remind me of something I remember thinking in my first playthrough specifically, but upon coming back to it, I don't really think I agree with anymore. When I first played the game, I remember thinking that they really could have done more with the water platforming as time has stopped, but going back to the game, they really do most of what they could do with that easily, at least, because you really can only do the solid floors as water with time frozen, or the solid walls, and that's really about it. I guess maybe they could do a thing where there's mist that you could maybe push around as time is frozen to generate platforms, but that feels like it would probably be a nightmare to platform around or program with what this game's already doing. And it would be a little bit too complex what the goal actively is for the game, so Save point right here, but normally this save point actually has a hidden wall in it that allows us to access the game's next sub-weapon, the Lost Holy Sword. This is effectively Luna Knight's equivalent to the Sword Familiar from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. You summon it, and it attacks enemies. With that said, while it does good damage, and is honestly pretty good for trying to avoid attacks while actively still getting some attacks in, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I prefer to be able to throw my sub-weapons like the chainsaw and all that to get either more hits in more efficiently, or to keep myself near the action to get more grazes. The best use case for my taste personally is if I'm having trouble remembering where a hidden wall is, because if there's a hidden wall on screen and you have it activated, it beelines it over to that and destroys it pretty much instantaneously. It's actively the best way to figure out if you're missing a hidden wall in a room, as you're trying to figure out what items you might be missing in a given area. Thinking about it though, when it comes to the Sword Familiar type thing in this type of genre, the Sword Familiar from Symphony really is the only one of those I tend to use a lot, as even its equivalent over in, say, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, I tended not to use as much just because of how the shard system worked and all that. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're going off towards the end game for what was in the game at release, at least. See you guys then.